Good morning, welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd over here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering natural health on this year for Wednesday morning, Rise and Shine. And this morning here, we're looking at the topic DNA code or zip code, free market or compassion. So what we're looking at here this morning as I share two articles and some health and health philosophy talk here this morning with you. So welcome again. Hopefully you had a blessed night rest and ready to take on the challenges of today. Let us pray. Our Father who art in heaven, I thank you again for the blessings of your word. I thank you, dear Lord, for the wisdom that you give that we might live and not die. I pray, dear Lord, that you may bless us, that we might walk humbly before thee all the days of our lives. This is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. So here we're looking at this topic, DNA code or zip code, free market or compassion. Two sets of ideas there, dealing with there's some topics that came up, some issues that are going on in our society that has to do with health. And I wanted to share this with you for your thinking philosophically when it comes on to life itself and in general health. These are important issues that are going on. The second article I'm going to deal with, I mentioned that first, is about the recalls. Just want to talk about it because they're talking about it, and then I want to deal with this article that I find very fascinating. It is in NBCnews.com, and it is entitled "Which Affect Health More, DNA Code or Zip Code?" And most of you know the answer to this. Both affect your health, your I guess it's a cute way to say it, but in other words, where you live and your environment, or is it your genes? And most actually both affect your health, but it's important for you to contemplate that and contemplate the type of lifestyle you're living and how you would be healthy. And so before I delve into it though, I want to kind of set you on a path of what my thinking is. Why these two articles? So the both of them brought to mind this idea here of when people talk about natural selection or evolution, and they tend to talk about natural selection and evolution where when certain things happen to certain groups of people, it is just the natural process. And I think natural selection and evolution tends to remove compassion and tend to seem to be in favor of what you call the free market. You don't choose winners and you don't choose losers. In other words, with natural selection or evolution, it's a natural process that is selecting it and choosing. And winners or losers are at the market whim. They happen by chance, it are by nature. There's a process in place, and choice doesn't have anything to do with it, and people's action is just naturally. So when I see certain things like the recall of the drugs, my thinking is always I sort of think about the concept of evolution, because people say that evolution is scientific and is proven. Well, this is in evolution, and normally talk about like culling the herd, and natural selection, you basically kill the stupid. So when situation like this happen and there's a drug recall and a whole bunch of people come down with cancer, then I'm start thinking natural selection or evolution, or is it the free market? That's what the free market demands, that these people come down with cancer. How do you analyze it? I wonder, how do you think about these things? So natural selection and evolution tends to be in line with the concept of free market rule concept. So free market rule concept is there. And so it is also, one could say, when it comes on to DNA, saying that everything that a person fall ill to is DNA, because that's just the lottery. And as you know, and I'll read in a second, it is not that simple. Even the concept of zip code is not as simple, because you live in a zip code where people are generally more healthy, but your home, as you'll mention, could be a home where alcohol or drugs flow and you end up dying. Is that natural selection, or is it, we should have compassion and try to warn those people or do things to protect people. So this idea of the free market rule concept, this idea of let the strongest survive, but in real life, people cheat, they lie, which result in death and failure of others. So when you think about that, and I'll get back to that as I'm going to kind of parse this as I go through this article. In the free market, so somebody died once, because it's natural selection or it's evolution because that's a scientific principle, but you forget that people will cut corners so that they can succeed at business, and then there's people dying of cancer. Is that natural selection? Is that the free market? See, there's more going on in life than just simplicity of concepts of evolution and natural selection, because human beings are immoral. They'll do things to win at the hurt of themselves or others. Again, there's more I want to talk there. So I'll get back to that. I'll read this text here and then I'll move on to the article. In 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8 through 12, it says, "Finally, be ye all of one mind, having compassion one of another. Love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous." So right there you have it. That when you come to the Bible is a different concept from the idea of let the free market run wild. Let evolution take its place. Let natural selection take its place. This is not God's way of thinking. The Bible doesn't teach this. Jesus Christ came to save sinners that had it coming to them. They deserve enough death. And yet Christ comes and says, no, I'm going to make the free market run. I'm going to make natural selection run. I'm going to try to stop it in its course. When Christ came, he fed those that were hungry. He didn't say let the market run. Let's cull the herd. When he came and he says let the sick get healing, and he healed the sick. He didn't say, well, because you did this and because you come in, you're in a zip code that is filled with sickness and demons, I'm going to leave you to your suffering. He says, no, I'm going to lift the suffering from you. So as Christians, we don't even subscribe to those philosophy, period. We don't believe that because somebody did things to curse himself that they shouldn't be helped. The curse might be there because the curse comes not causeless, but we are here to help those who are suffering because their own doing, or because their parents, because they got it through the blood genetically. But when you're in a system where you believe, well, yeah, that's what's calling the herd, you can become callous to the suffering and pains of others. And the Bible says, love as brethren. Love is different from just saying, whatever, let the free market run. Because there's certain things that cannot be left to the free market. And especially when we're talking about the pain and suffering of others. We can't say, well, let the strongest survive. Because that's the whole point. The person is sick. They're not the strongest. They need compassion. They need forgiveness. They need tender mercies. We can't do this. At least if we do it, we do it to ourselves. So not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, knowing that ye are thereunto called, that ye should inherit a blessing. So notice is that we can't render evil for evil. See, so since the labs, as I'll read in the second part of my presentations, that send the tainted drugs are from China and India. Well, what American pharmaceuticals could do is just send back them some tainted drugs and kill some of their people. But that's not what God called us to do. God called us to that. No, would not be natural selection or free market. That would be tit for tat. See, so we don't believe in that. That's eye for an eye. Again, notice here, for he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain from his tongue from evil, and his lips from lips that they speak no guile. Let him eschew evil and do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it. For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open unto their prayers. But the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. So here, even the last text, it tells you that in life there's no such thing as no natural selection and evolution and all that type of stuff. Because although people might say the principles, you always see that karma are you reap what you sow, or as Christ says, I will repay evildoers. It happens. And there's no explanation for that more than that there's a God and there's a power working to make these things happen. So the Bible simply says we must love as brethren and be compassionate one towards another. So we look at these things, we look at this idea of zip code, and then the question I would ask myself is, what should I do? Christ would work with the zip codes or the areas or the families that are most suffering. That would be the difference. Notice here, which matters more to your health, nature or environment? A new study has started to answer that question in a comprehensive way, and it shows the scale falls on the side of nurture over nature, at least for young adults. A team at Harvard Medical School and the University of Queensland in Australia built what they say is the world's largest database of twin data based on health insurance claims covering nearly 45 million people. Twins share much of their genetic code and sometimes share the same environmental, so they are useful for studying the impact genetics has on health, behavior, and other outcome. The study published in the journal Nature Genetics doesn't have any big surprises. Overall, for diseases and conditions that hit people by early adulthood, genes account for about 40% of the variations from one person to another. Environmental broadly, climate, pollution, socioeconomic status account for most of the rest. So a kind of a 60-40 split at young adult, and I imagine as you get older, it gets even worse. Environment usually also includes behavior such as diet and lifestyle. So when they say environment or nurture, they're talking about, I should say that when they say environment, they're talking about also diet and lifestyle. So or you eat or you drink, because could be because of if you're in the Mediterranean area, you would have a Mediterranean diet. So that would be across the spectrum for the most part, I guess. Genetics had the largest influence on early in life eye disease and cognitive and learning disorder, right? So there's a slight possibility, I guess, a 40% possibility that if you see your parents wearing glasses, probably you're going to end up wearing glasses when you're a young adult, or what it says earlier in life. Environment was the clearest factor in morbid obesity and, unsurprisingly, on infections such as Lyme's disease, which spread by ticks. It was also, to no one's surprise, that the biggest factor in lead poisoning. So those three things there, if you're obese, you're going to find that the more areas you go where the diet and lifestyle is inclined to obesity, then you're higher chance of being obese at a certain age. So that's logical if you see this there. So this there is not just, so let's go back to my topic, DNA code or zip code or free market or compassion. So you can see there right there when it comes on to like obesity. Obesity is caused so much other disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, and other type of disease, cancers. So the person is obese, they have obesity, the person is obese, they're gonna be susceptible to a whole string of disease, irritable bowel syndromes, all these various different disease that has to do with basically the size and the type of food. But if the person is in a certain zip code, they have a high chance of being obese. So then that is not per se a natural process. That's a process that is a cultural process. It's a process that is a lifestyle process. It's not the genetics. And so we now would want to work and want to put material out, like what I do and others do, to try to override that, because you could be the area that obesity is running rampant. You could even have it where your family members are obese, but because you have a different philosophy, you're not obese. So then you start to realize, wait a minute then. So the philosophy could override even the environment and the genetics. I hope you get that. So you could have a situation where you have a twin, and this is why this study is so important. You could have a twin, they live in the same house, they stayed on appearance insurance up until 26, and one twin has a philosophy that they need to be healthy, fit, and they go exercise. The other twin doesn't have that philosophy, and they become obese. Now they're in the same area where there's a high obesity rate. They're in a house where the mother, father, and everybody has obesity. But one say, I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to do whatever, and their weight stays down. The other person say, I'm going to eat like everybody else, and they blow up. And they have obesity, morbid obesity. And then all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, so it's not just environment, it's not just a natural process, it's not just whatever. Philosophy can change. So you can add philosophy to the mix. Like they could do the study and they could find you could have a zip code and people who have a certain philosophy within all of the bad zip codes as they broke it down, but they're not affected and their genes not getting expressed a certain way, and their body's not getting expressed according to the genetics and the environment. So you could override both, and I kind of jump the shark there, as they say, real quickly. But this is where I say, so you have DNA, zip code, free market, and all your stuff that can throw out there. And then you could say, well, no, there's other factors that could override all of that. And one of the factors that I know is true is philosophy. That, as I say, you could be in an area, everybody's slim, and you have a philosophy that you leave nothing on the table. You even take people leftovers in the plate and scrape it over to your plate. And you left nothing on the table. And then you become obese. And then the question is, what happened? The environment around you, the genes, everything is telling you you should be slim. And you get large. The other thing they mentioned is Lyme disease. Again, you could be in an area where a high rates of Lyme disease because you're in an area where you're exposed to ticks. And that's environment. Now that doesn't change anything. So now the question is, if you have ticks, can you override that? You could by, again, diet and lifestyle, by taking natural remedies, doing things to boost your immune system at all time. But again, it's just this idea here. Also, not surprising to see a big factor in lead poisoning. So you could be in an area like Flint, but you have a philosophy that you don't drink water unless it goes through a charcoal filter. And all of a sudden now, even though the genetics, the zip code, is affecting everybody around you, it doesn't affect you because you override the zip code and you get a filter that is certified to clear lead out and clear all the toxic chemicals out. And everybody around you is dying of certain cancers or having brain problems because of the lead. So this is where I believe even all of these conversations about whether it be natural selection or whether it be all of these things, they forget that there's other factors. You know, if people talk about the free market, they forget that there's other factors. And one of the other factor is that there's philosophy. And your philosophy can make you basically live almost in a pig pen and not live as a pig, while other people are in the pig pen and living as a pig and creating and making the pig pen more of a place not to live. Genetics, continue reading. Genetics has the largest influence on early life disease. Okay, cognitive, I read that. The 56,000 twin pairs, that's a lot, were all 24 and younger at the time of the study, which started with people born in 1985 and later. That's because the researchers needed to follow people who stayed on their parents' health insurance plans. U.S. law allows people to keep their children on their health insurance up to the age of 26. The study also included more than 72,000 sibling pairs. So those are very good data points to look at. Sibling pairs and twins. because they're going to share the same DNA for the most part, share the same home and same zip code. And so to look at the health outcome would be fascinating. And that's why I'm saying it'd be interesting if they take that data point and even break it down by, the rest of the ways you can break it down by race, religion, all that type of stuff. And see, because as I say, philosophy affects more. Because you could say, oh, it's just all nature. And then you realize it's more complicated than just nature and environment and all that. The study was not aimed at answering the question of whether you can blame your genes or zip code for disease. It's more to lay a basis for further research into what causes disease on a population basis, on a larger basis. Our findings can provide signposts that inform subsequent research efforts and help scientists narrow focus their pursuit, says Shrig Lakini, a postdoctoral research fellow at Harvard Medical School, who work on the study. Many studies have shown that zip code has a strong effect on health across the U.S. One 2013 study at the University of Washington found that people living in San Francisco or wealthy Washington, D.C. suburbs were much healthier than those living in Appalachia and rural Mississippi. So I'll pause there again. So that makes sense. If you've been to, I've never been to San Francisco, but I've been to other places in California, and then DC. So if you go to certain areas, you'll find that certain things become more normal. Like if you're walking on the road and you see a Pilates class going on or some yoga class, and you see more gyms and people look more fit, you realize that could be the environment. In other words, to me, this is why I say philosophy is important as a factor, because you could be in an environment like that, and the environment like that is communicating to you that this is the way of life. And so people in those environments, they believe that they should, instead of probably coming home and first thing turn on the TV and blow their brains out with nonsense, they probably feel like, oh, probably I should go get something healthy to eat, then go do some Pilates, some yoga, some gym workout and stuff like that. I go to the beach, I go for a jog. It's a different philosophy, and that philosophy drive health. And so it's important for you to know that. So you could be in an area like Appalachia, and now the philosophy is let's get high. But you could be in that area, and while most young people are getting high, you are, because of your philosophy, you are acting as if you're in DC or in one of those healthier neighborhoods. You're eating healthy, you're exercising, you're going online watching videos about how to get healthier. You're trying to find as much health food as you can, and you're living a different way. And so that's why, for me, the concept of let the free market reign, or natural selection, or all these other things that tend to make it seem like there's nothing above the mere whatever nature throw at me, I must accept it. And my belief is not whatever nature throws at you must accept it, because there's other issues in life, like I say in the topic, compassion. And I should add to that topic, philosophy. So is it DNA or zip code or free market, or is it compassion, or is it philosophy? What else is going on? Because as you know, if you're in an environment and people loving you, you feel so much happier, don't you? Love is love and care are very healing things. If you're in an environment, and you could be in a poor environment, but you have people loving you, you feel rich. You feel like you have a rich life. You don't feel, think about it, our happiest times in our lives is not when we have material possession, is when we're younger and we're at school, or we're at church or play, and we're having a good time and people loving each other and we're having fun together. That's normally your happiest times in life. But as we get older and we become more into material possession, we become sad. And then we're focused on the zip code, and we focus on DNA. Think about a lot of our conversation in our society is who have what DNA, who is superior to each other. And the more people talk like that, is the more suicidal and depressed they get. But when we talk about compassion, where we love as brethren, And then we care for each other and we care for our bodies. We care for our environment. Aren't we happier? You're happy when you go into a place and it's like a pigsty. Are you happier when something you go somewhere and it's manicured, it's clean, it's organized? You feel better about life, don't you? I mean, at least I do. And so, again, when you think about going on vacation, let's just say it this way. When you think about going on vacation, do you want to go somewhere where it look like a bomb just went off, like some of these bombed out areas, in these ghetto areas? You don't want to go. You don't think about that's vacation. You want to go somewhere where there's gardens and it's manicured and there's people exercising and people are happier. So that's a different environment. Those are different environment. You feel like that's you go. That's where you go for vacation. You know, if you want to go on missionary work, normally if you say missionary work, you think let's go to the bombed out areas. That's where they need the love of Jesus. Although both areas need it, but it's just a different idea. So when we think about natural health, or we think about all these things, we always have to know that what drives our philosophy is, to me, primarily compassion. So if you ask me something, I'm not gonna land on the side of free market. I believe in free market because I believe that's what make things good. You don't try to limit people's ability to make money and to explore and invent. But I'm gonna land on the side of free market. I'm gonna land on the side of compassion. I'm not gonna land on the side of free market. If you ask me DNA, I'm gonna land on the side of compassion again. Because I know that you can have a DNA weakness, but if you care for yourself, you can help let's put it this way. So somebody come to me and say, they have a child and this child has autism, and they say the child will never be per se quote unquote normal. I'm gonna say, well, it's probably best, compassionately wise, sensible wise, to not feed the child all kind of fake foods. But another person could say, what's the point? Give a child all the syrup they can take. My thing is that it's better to have the child get some relief by eating healthier, even if they will never be 100% normal because they have some neurological weaknesses, DNA wise. So compassion to me always overrides. But somebody will say they're compassionate if they feed a child chocolate all day long and Fruit Loops and all these things that can get the child bouncing and it gonna wreak havoc with their DNA, with their neurological system. And the child's gonna even be more damaged. And I'm gonna say, no, that's not compassion. Now people argue that's compassion, but I just think true compassion is your relief as much as can, the suffering. And it's the same thing. Who needs more help? The person in a zip code that is more messed up or the person in a zip code that is less messed up? I think the person in a zip code that's more messed up. So more tax dollars, more funded, more help should go towards people who are old, people in areas where there's a drug epidemic, people in areas where if they're like military people and they have damage because of fighting war. Anything that people are at the wits end and they're vulnerable, they should get more help. So somebody said, but that's not the free market. I know that's compassion. And we always have to be more compassionate in our dealings. And when we look at a lot of these things, as it says here, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Appalachia, rural Mississippi, where people are dying more, where people have more bad health outcomes, is in those areas. But if you go to those areas and you say to people, what will you vote for? Free market or or compassion? They'll vote for free market. They'll say cut funding, vote Republican, vote, whatever. And you'll be like, okay, this is weird. So if you look at it, similar studies have supported these findings. Many have found the different states have greatly different rates of heart, stroke, cancer, and other disease. This particular study only shows effects on disease that hit early in life. It found 40% of diseases included in the study had a genetic component. 25% could be linked to a shared environment, such as living in the same home and having shared social influence. The biggest influence was when people shared both genes and same environment. The finding opposed what scientists and doctors have said for years, that health is often a matter of environment and genes acting together. People with certain genetic predisposition are more likely, for instance, to become obese if they live in a place where it's hard to exercise and difficult to eat healthy. And as you know, the more you move away from certain locations, the harder it is to find healthy restaurants, healthy health food stores, healthy options in the supermarket, and so forth. You more find diners and things like that. But remember, that is a product of philosophy. If you believe a certain way, you gonna open up a certain restaurant. You know what I mean? Like if you think about it, if you believe that you should do barbecue, well, you're gonna open up a barbecue restaurant. But if you think about it, you say, wait a minute, that burnt meat or burnt food is carcinogenic. You're not gonna open up a barbecue joint. You ain't gonna do it. And if a whole bunch of people in the society believe that anything burnt and black is a cancer cause and think that should be thrown in the garbage, they're not gonna go buy. So the philosophy is part of the environment. And as I say, the social, what they call it, social influence. But again, that's where they are safe. But remember, again, you could go into any environment and you find that if like for instance, if a person is Seventh Adventist and they have philosophy that you should eat pork, even if they're obese, they're going to be still healthier, apples for apples, than somebody who is obese but eating all kind of red meat, pork, alligator, all kind of shrimp and all that type of stuff. So that environmental factor is one thing. The zip code is another thing, but the philosophy is also another big factor, because some might think it's so easy. You are what you eat, but you eat what you think. So it's not just what you eat, because you won't put something in your mouth unless you believe it's food. But if you don't believe it's food, you ain't gonna put it in your mouth, no matter how beautiful it looks, unless you do it by accident. So a lot of these environmental factors and stuff like that. Again, the other thing I wanted to talk about there when it comes down to this environment and zip code, think about this, right? That there's so many people that are living in certain zip code that they're gonna drink the cheapest alcohol and more alcohol than, say, somebody in a different zip code. If you're in a certain zip code, you're gonna partake of certain drugs. So apples for apples. This person over here in the zip code partaking of drugs. This person over here, B, A, B, partaking of drugs. The person in the richer zip code might be partaking of, drugs that are going to be less damaging, pharmaceutical grade drugs. The person in the poor zip code is going to be taking all like K2 and all the weird, crazy stuff coming out of China. And they're in a different zip code, they're poor. So now they have a child. Both of them have a child. A child is born. One child has, they're low on the spectrum with autism or something. The other child is high on the spectrum, severely damaged. Child come out with all kind of mess and whatever. Same thing when it comes on to food. One person in one zip code, they're eating from Whole Foods and all the healthy store, Trader Joe's, all that stuff, all the health food stores. The other person over here eating from every slimy stuff that is all half dead, half spoiled, half rotten from all these very different fast food restaurants, Chinese restaurants, blah, blah. The outcome is going to be different for the child. The child is going to be born with different effects. So when you look at it again, it's the zip code, but also the zip code is philosophy. Part of that is not just people living in a certain zip code. They have a certain level of thinking and belief when they come on to care for their body. One person live broke, the other person live rich. The less money you have often is the more stress. Money doesn't solve all problems, but it certainly take care of a lot of problems. It answers a lot of issues. So there's so much other things going on there. And that's why I believe that with philosophy can change a lot of that. Because you could have a person live in a poor zip code in an environment which is more towards fast food and junk food and cheap food. And because the person have a different philosophy, they're taking herbs, they're eating a vegan diet, they're exercising, they're doing all these things, but yet their zip code will tell you that that person is not in that zip code. What's the difference? The philosophy. This is why I think like a research on that would be interesting, to take that now out of that how much thousand people that were they have in that database now, and try to extrapolate from that which which are the people that I was trying to find a number, but it was a 726,000 sibling pairs. So 720,000 pairs of brothers and sisters. And then if you could pull from that, say even 500 pairs that are like have a different philosophy when it comes on to health, and then observe their outcome in comparison to the rest of the group. If you could get a large enough sampling, so find some Hindus and some Adventists and some different people who have a different philosophy, and take those sibling pair and compare their health outcome. How does their zip code and their DNA, how does that affect when it comes on when you add now another category, philosophy, in comparison to the rest of the group who doesn't have a health philosophy? And I'll be certain that the health outcome will be phenomenal, because it's number one. Just think about all the environmental issues we're dealing with and health issues. How when you have a compassionate philosophy where you take care of nature, you take care of the animals, you don't even eat the animals. You're more trying to be in line with life, whether it be Buddhism, Hinduism, or any ism that tend to take care of the body, eat a healthier diet for whatever reason. Just think about less environmental impact, less damage to the body, healthier outcomes, less obesity, all that stuff, and how that would affect. Anyhow, I think that's fascinating. So that would be something to look at. So anyhow, but you look at the DNA code, zip code, free market, compassion. I go that when you have compassion, it changes all of that stuff. And you could have a genetic weakness, you could have a weak liver, but you take some herbs, you eat less filthy foods, you eat a more hygienic diet, and that philosophy overcomes, to a certain degree, even 100%, your DNA weakness, overcome your zip code, overcome the free market, overcome natural selection, overcome evolution, overcome all of that. Sometimes the winners are monsters. So I'm saying this because I'm going to go to my second article. Because when you think about this whole idea here now, which I'm switching gear. Hopefully I can switch this gear in my brain and not complicate this conversation, which is difficult in my mind. So sometimes winners are are monsters. So when you think about that, because when we talk about now the drug recall, which is what I'm going to next. In the drug recall issue, we're finding now that says so much of the drugs, 80% of all drug components are made outside of America, and 40% of the drugs are made outside of America that Americans partake of. Legal drugs, I'm talking. So when we think about that, right, you think about this push about the free market. People argue that you should always have made the free market reign. Let the winners come forward. Don't pick the winners. And if you mess with the free market, what you do, you're selecting winners or losers, which can be true in certain places like communism and stuff like that. But life is not that simplistic, because even a free market system, quote unquote free market, you can pick winners. You can pick winners because people are corrupt. People take bribes. People look the other way as long as their pocket is being lined. So sometimes the winners are monsters. This is another thing to note, that you could have a company doing phenomenal, but they're poisoning the community. Should you allow the free market to reign? So imagine you're in an environment, a zip code, and you're watching the people around you getting obese and dying, or dying of drug overdose. Should you say let the free market reign and let the drugs, the legal drugs, flow into the community without no stopping it, because you don't want to interfere with the free market? How far do you go? Many people say, oh no, you can't affect the free market in no way. But the free market could reign, You could have no compassion on those who are ill because you believe in evolution, and the free market is killing people. And somebody could say, well, Lord, why would you want to stop that? It's natural selection. It's killing the foolish. It's culling the herd of the weak-minded ones. Everybody on drugs and they're weak-minded. That's what many people say. Notice the winners does not always define who plays or who played by the rule. When you think about that, the winners are not does not always define who plays or played by the rule. You could have a person there winning that's at the podium. They have conquered the market, but they did it through lying and stealing. How you think about that? Because you could have a company making drugs. Just to get you up to speed real fast, you could have a company making a drug. And they're making this drug, and this drug is Zartar. Let me see if I get the name right. This drug is Valsartan, right? And they say we can make this drug for you for cheaper than any manufacturer inside of America can make it. You say, well, you have the contract. We're going to subcontract out the drug to you. You make it. But their method of making it is in such a way that they can make it cheaper because they're using some seriously toxic chemical in the process. Is not removing some of the byproducts that are dangerous. Number one. Number two, they're able to abuse their workers and pay their workers wages that is a shame. And now they're able to make it cheaper. And the free market would demand that you should go to them because at the end of the day, day one, the drug is cheaper. But now, that cheapness comes at a price. And that cheapness comes at a price that has nothing to do with let the free market reign or natural selection or any of this type of stuff that people talk about. But it has all to do with greed and blindness and silliness. To say that always that you should outsource everything and you shouldn't protect workers who are going to get a decent wage because you will always do it for the cheapest price. But that cheapness oftentimes pay. I've known people, they have one philosophy when it comes down to business, and it's cheap. And they always get lost. It's almost like they never make a deal that doesn't end in financial loss or frustration because their one philosophy is always cheap. And so it is in this type of stuff. You could say, I'm going to find the cheapest workers I can find. I'm going to pay them the cheapest or lowest amount of money. I'm going to find the cheapest byproducts to make my end product. And I'm going to fill my toys with lead. I'm going to fill my drugs with poison. But it's going to be cheap. And somebody say, I'll buy it because it's cheap. Because my only philosophy in life is cheap. And cheapness does not pay. I'm sure you've heard that before. And it's not because somebody win that means they are the true winners. Because in life, a lot of barbaric people, very barbaric people, are winners. They're the heroes of our societies. But yet, at what cost? So the winners could win all, at all costs, and lose even. You have some people who, they're trying to be winners and they die trying to be winners. But they kill a lot of people in the instant. So I'm going to read a piece of this article. I won't read the whole article because of the sake of time. But I'll show you here that to me, when the Bible talks about compassion make us that we can be right in our philosophy or left in our philosophy, conservative or liberal. We always have to think compassion on all sides and make sure that we're not always for one philosophy or the other. We just take situations as they are and analyze them. Notice here, blood pressure drug recall. So FDA investigates foreign plants that made drugs and cancer-causing impurities. The FDA inspection of factories in China and India that made carcinogen tainted ingredients that forced dozens of recall of blood pressure drugs in recent months show a history of problems. Drug companies recalled dozens of lots of frontline blood pressure and heart medication, valsartan, losartan, and irbesartan, alone or in combination with other drugs after testing revealed the drugs had cancer-causing impurities in trace amounts. The Food and Drug Administration is investigating the underlying cause of impurities. The federal agency has completed its inquiry, but inspection reports reveal problems at both factories in Zhejiang Pharmaceutical in China and Hetero Labs in India before the carcinogen tainted drugs were discovered. The recall products are part of a large class of drugs called angiotensin II receptor blockers, or ARBs, which work by blocking the effects of a hormone that narrow blood vessels. Many of these commonly prescribed drugs are not part of the recall. Consumers can check the FDA website for a full list of recall drugs. So remember here, I'm just talking about philosophy. I'm not even talking about what are the side effects of valsartan, losartan, and irbesartan. Not talking about that per se. Just the mere fact that you have a drug that blacken hormone that will narrow or constrict the blood vessel. Blocking a hormone, I believe, would have other side effect, because when the body is telling the blood vessel constrict, it says open up the blood vessel. So this as I say, talking about philosophy. This now doesn't tell the patient that they need to exercise, drink more water, change their diet, deal with their stress. All these are the things that can be done to help regulate the blood pressure and get the blood pressure into a more even keel. This is just saying to the body that don't constrict. Keep the flow open. Open the flow of the blood vessels. That's a whole nother ball of wax. So that's just, I wanted to throw that in there. So this is, and this is actually phenomenal, that humanity can become so advanced in their studies that they can figure out we can just block this one hormone that's causing the blood vessel to constrict under certain circumstances, so the blood vessel never constrict. But now this is called a problem. I remember these things all have side effects separately from the recalls. So continue reading here. The recall underscored the FDA enormous challenge in overseeing a global pharmaceutical supply chain in which about 80% of drug ingredients and 40% of finished drugs sold in the U.S. are made or handled at more than 3,000 plants overseas. So they're right. That's an enormous task. 3,000 plants you have to go inspect. The FDA has worked through a backlog of unchecked foreign drug plants that has grown over the past decades as the pharmaceutical industry accelerates production overseas. Remember, before New Jersey was the capital for all these drug manufacturing companies. So more and more of these plants are being shipped abroad, or they open up abroad, close here. The FDA scrapped its policy of checking all foreign and domestic plants at least once every 2 years, instead prioritizing checks at facilities based on potential risk to U.S. consumers. Since 2015, the agency has conducted more inspection overseas than at domestic factories. Even when inspectors identified issues, it's not always enough to prevent tainted drugs from reaching the U.S., where they are prescribed by doctors and taken by patients. Analysts said the agency struggled to keep pace with a global industry. As we see, when there is a widespread recall and widespread quality question, there is a tremendous price from a public health standpoint. Michael Carome, director of the Health Research Group of Public Citizen. Though the FDA worked to ensure the quality and safety of drugs sold in the U.S., Carome said it's under pressure to reduce drug shortages. There is always that pressure to not cease manufacturing to add to the drug shortage list. I think we have a federal agency that is overwhelmed in trying to keep up FDA hires inspectors, assign staff overseas. So the congressional investigators found in 2017 that the FDA was making strides in overseas inspection this decade, but almost 1,000 plants had never been inspected as of mid 2016. So that means 30% of all the plants abroad never been inspected. The Government Accountability Office, the nonpartisan investigative arm of Congress, reported that 46% of the FDA offshore inspectors' job are unfilled. So that's the offshore, almost 50%, 46%. In response to the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, the FDA said it hired more inspectors, developed a workforce recruitment and retention plan, offered incentive pay to retain foreign staff, and temporarily assigned domestic staff to short-term stint overseas. Only 15% of the inspectors' jobs were filled. Only 15% of inspectors' jobs were unfilled as of July 2018. The FDA prioritized domestic and overseas inspection based on potential risk, evaluating factors such as a factory compliance, recall history, date of last inspection, and the risk of drugs. Stepping up inspections and producing detailed findings don't guarantee that drug companies will correct or prevent manufacturing problems that can lead to recalls. They aren't running the plant. This gentleman says here, people say you should go back and inspect all of the time. Really, a lot of responsibilities on the people who manufacture or offer these drugs for sale. Since 2013, nearly 300 products have been recalled by 65 drug plants within 1 year of FDA inspection, according to Kaiser Health. And I'll just stop there. So there's more there. You can go online and look at this article. I'll tell you the article again so you can look at it to read the whole thing, because I just read probably 40% or so of the article. So it keeps going. Blood pressure drug recall is what you'll find. And this is from USA Today and is written by Ken Al Tucker. Ken Al Tucker, A.L. Tucker. So you look at this here, and where I stopped there, because I wanted to stop right there because of the sake of time, so I can pull in what I was discussing, that they had 300 products had been recalled by 65 drug manufacturing plant. That's almost how many times? 5 products per plant within 1 year of an inspection. So they got an inspection, and within a year of that inspection, each of them recalled about 5 drugs. So that's a high rate of since 2013. So we're talking about the last 5 years within that time period. So that's a high rate of coming back. So to me, when it comes down to certain things in life, there's this idea that you have to make the free market rate, but this idea that some things, they're so highly sensitive, especially things that you put in your mouth, that to me FDA inspection, or especially I should say things that are can be highly toxic. So what we're talking about when we're talking about these drugs and stuff like that, it goes back to this idea that you're dealing with a very narrow margin for error. And when you deal with a very narrow margin for error like that, that death can result or cancer can result. The narrower the margin is, the higher the risk, is the greater the need for oversight. So some things in my mind, it takes on a bigger looming issue, like supply of water. Certain things to me, it just doesn't make sense to turn it over to private sector, where the focal point is profitability, because you can't live without water. You know what I mean? You can't live without certain things, especially in certain environments. Water is world over, I know it, but I'm just saying. So this thing here, when you talk about these type of decisions, to me, I even though for me personally, I stay away from these things, but at the end of the day, it's important to note that you still have to look out for the best interest of people. You can't have this idea that let the free market reign all the time, especially when it comes out to these things. You can't have this idea that, well, who cares? It's it's evolution at play. They're just culling the herd. People gonna die anyhow. So what's the big deal? They're just gonna die from Valsartan. You don't have to get inspection. The government don't need to get involved in private business. Um, this to me doesn't make sense. I would prefer they pull more inspection, quote unquote, from even inspecting lettuce than you do these drugs, because again the it's a narrow situation there. If you don't get those inspections and tainted drugs get into these lines, people die fast. It won't be like people just having a upset stomach, so to say. I'm not downplaying the risk of having lettuce, but you can still wash your lettuce. You can still make that second effort. But with these drugs, you're not washing the drugs or anything. You just take it as you get it. So, and as I said, these things are already toxic to the body, period, because of what they're doing, much less to have other toxicity to do it. This is just where my issue is. So when I look at this thing, and I look at especially people can be so vulnerable to the whims of others, and it is not so easy to simply say, well, we need to make the free market reign, or we need to whatever. One has to be able to be very careful with the health of others, and especially when we're dealing with something that's already a toxic substance. One has to make sure that you check and double check, because one mistake normally will end up with people dying or coming down with cancer or stuff like that, even with the drug itself being so dangerous. So I say this also, that if the strong start to become the prey because of false notions that some areas of life should all be open to the whims of the free market, then that can be a problem. So just imagine if you said all your life that we shouldn't touch the free market, we shouldn't affect, say, healthcare. We should have insurance for the poor, because the poor are just scabs and they're just basically stealing, living off I forget the way they call it, but they're living off the backs of everybody else. Well, what happened if you now start become susceptible to the whims of the free market and you start to become poor? Because if you look at many areas now, you find it in like the Appalachia area and stuff like that. You find the same people have decided that, we work hard, we have a good work ethic, we're not worthless like these people over there, but they now are being exposed to their own philosophy. And now the educational system is in trouble. The drug system is in trouble, because there's so much problem with drugs. Are the drugs that got them hooked were drugs that are legally given. And so you can make the free market reign. You should not impose any restriction on doctors. And the doctors got the free market reign. And what they did, they get a whole bunch of their own fellow citizens, hook them up on drugs. And nobody did stop it, because they didn't want to interfere with the big pharmaceutical companies selling their drugs to their own people. So that's where that problem is. You could say, yeah, let the doctors free to prescribe what they want to prescribe to their patient, no limitation. And the doctors did. And the end result is we have a whole bunch of our society that are dying. And we cannot take this effect like the lost people, the secular people, with a secular philosophy that, well, it's just the culling of the herd. It's just the weak. Because then what happened when their family member died? And they realized the family member didn't die because they were weak. They died because they got an injury. They went to the doctor for a painkiller. And what the doctor did, the doctor gave them a drug that is an opiate, and now they're hooked. Now they're buying heroin, and next they drop dead from fentanyl overdose. And somebody said, oh, they're a druggie. And somebody said, no, they weren't a druggie. They just got no compassion showed them. They got the free market. They got no regulation. They got no oversight from those who were in charge. And so that's why I believe when all things is done, the Bible says, finally, brethren, be of one mind, having compassion one for another, love us, brethren, be pitiful, be courteous. You pity those who are suffering, because you never know if one day the strong is going to become the prey, and then he now going to wish that there was some type of pity and courtesy, shown him some type of compassion, shown him because he's in a situation that others were in, where and he didn't show them. Now he needs that compassion. So that's why we have to be compassionate. Compassion, is just caring for others when they're at the whims, when they're at the wits' end, when they have, no recourse. You take care of them. When we do this, we're better. When we don't do this, certainly we're not doing right. We want to do right. Let us pray. Thank you, Lord, again for your love and the blessings of your word. The blessing, dear Lord, of the philosophy that you give to us, a biblical health message, a message of compassion, a message of showing mercy to even those who are guilty. May you be with us, dear Lord, that we might truly always be like your Son, having compassion to those who are out the way, and not being, heartless to those who are suffering, or those who are poor, those who are from other ethnicity. Bless us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. Thanks for being with me here on the line. Pray that I may talk to you tomorrow morning again live when we talk about current events. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.